I will keep my paper passport until they pull it out of my cold, dead hands. Like, there's no way. I'm never gonna get a digital passport.
Made Daily. Hello and welcome to the Made Daily podcast. I'm John Michael
I'm
Thomas.
Pierre Hegeman.
Made Daily covers our favorite online stories from tech to social media.
Our expert thoughts and opinions on information security, website design and development,
and other random stories from the internet. This week's episode of the Made Daily podcast is made possible by Cinemechanics, the premier camera and lens rental house. When you're shooting your next film, commercial, or streaming TV series, Cinemechanics will be there to make sure your project stays next level.
just like they're making sure our project on Sunday is staying next level.
That's true.
And
Yes.
Made Daily version 5, the all-in-one secure website builder with built-in data collection tools and secure customer portals.
And one of our way back internet favorites. It's an analog item to this week. Let's talk about the worst hacks of 2024. We covered a few of these.
Yep.
Wired was nice enough to compile a list, and this is a
Partial
topic
list.
yep, not all of them, but this is a topic we talk about a lot. Cyber attacks, growing threat for decades. This year might be one of the record ones.
I think every year from now on, it's kind of like climate change. We're just going to keep breaking records.
Which is scary, and it's time stuff starts to happen for this stuff. So what's happening is hackers are getting better. They're evolving their techniques. Sometimes there's big coordinated campaigns, and if you're a country that has economic issues, it's makes sense to become just a cyber criminal enterprise and be backed by your state, and you might grab somebody's Bitcoin or something.
Yeah, and I think moving forward, I think these trend, it's just there's a continuing emphasis on exploiting these weaknesses, and it's becoming more and more necessary for clients to deploy security solutions, security software, security policies and procedures, and I think. And if you look at these breaches, and we'll take a look at some of them, but everybody's always exploiting the same thing over and over and over again, right? So if you can train yourself and your team and get the right tools in place to address these, then you're going to be probably in a better position, at least until it's always this game of whack-a-mole, right? Where attackers are they're constantly evolving, finding new ways to break into your stuff. So once we've plugged all these holes, they'll find new holes.
Yeah. I also think it gets complicated when every company or now cars, everything wants to be connected to the cloud. It's great that cars can have cameras on them and they can be remote locked, but do you want that in control of the company that you purchased the product from? Because that's what's happening with some of these, like some of the Tesla vehicles and stuff.
Yeah.
And the question is though, like all of that stuff that they're wanting us to be in control of is just more vectors, more opportunities to get in. We talked about the Kia thing where the cars are getting locked.
There's literally no reason to have your car on the internet ever. Well, or your refrigerator or your house.
But it's in farm equipment now. John Deere, has that stuff.
It's so that they can enforce license restrictions. This is always in favor of the companies and never in favor of the consumer. And like at best, I would want some kind of say you see it in like implantable medical devices, like pacemakers are now online, which I think is a terrible idea. I mean, I see value in collecting some of that data, right? You want to know over
train
time
on what
but you do it as a store and forward, right? The thing can store the data, and then we'll take a dump every time you go visit the office or whatever, and then you can analyze that data.
Mm.
Having stuff connected to the internet is just an invitation to have it
Mm-hmm.
be hacked. And if you have critical things like your functioning of your car, or God forbid, the functioning of your pacemaker, uh, not a good. I mean, embeddable devices have very, 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 very strict security controls and requirements, so I wouldn't be too worried about that. But still, things on the internet, scary
Yeah.
stuff.
And that's the world we're living in.
Yeah.
So, number one on Wired was the China's Salt Typhoon telecom breaches. So we talked a little bit about this. This was the group Salt Typhoon that got into Verizon and AT&T, plus others around the world. So what? So they were in the networks, sleuthing around the phone networks, grabbing personal data, um,
Yeah.
and trying to take over SIM cards and stuff like that. I would imagine as well.
Yeah, I mean, and we can reference back to the previous pod. We talked about this before, where it's these advanced persistent threats, these oftentimes countries, state actors that break into systems and then just sit there waiting for something interesting to happen. We've talked about it a few different times, and like, um, yeah, this is another example. I agree with this one being on the list of worse hacks, because anytime you get the FBI saying we should stop using a fundamental mode of communication because of a breach, you know that it's bad. FBI saying don't text people anymore because you don't know if it's going to be secure, and everybody should switch to using encrypted messaging apps. That's a big deal.
And there was a story that came out today. There was a U.S. Army soldier who was linked to hacking um, uh, Trump and Harris's phones. It's charged by the feds from a guy from Texas.
Hmm.
You know, it's like if we're getting it from the international side and we're getting it domestically, it's sort of like like start to pay attention to
Yeah.
this stuff. So next one was we talked about this one too. Change Healthcare's ransomware attack.
Another one, when you're affecting 1/3 of the population of the United States, you know two things. One, yes, that's one of the worst breaches of the year, and two, that company is too big. I think like United Healthcare, the Change was a subsidiary of United Health, and when they're processing, so when they went down, and
Medical bill
25 to
processing.
50% of the companies couldn't do billing, that is a major problem, right? And when your personal data is 150 million people, it's too big. It shouldn't be allowed. And that kind of, we were talking about the future and sort of regulatory requirements. I think it falls to the government to say
Hmm.
you 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 can't. We used to have this thing called the Sherman Antitrust Act, right?
Right.
Which said you can't get so big that you can take down half the country if you have an outage. And it wasn't on the list, but CrowdStrike was a similar thing, right? When you're so
Mm-hmm.
big that a failure in one company takes out half the country for a day or week, it's it's not it's not good for the society.
And in this story, Change Healthcare ends up paying a $22 million ransom
That's it.
to the hacking company to contain the situation. Um, but 100 million victims.
Yeah.
Um, it's and then the quote is like failures to implement basic security protections. So then and it's like you wonder so they got phone numbers, addresses, banking, and other financial information, and healthcare records, diagnosis, prescriptions, and treatment details.
Yeah.
Now, what's somebody going to do with that stuff when they have it?
I
You know,
mean, yeah. So that's phishing, it's extortion. It's uh, yeah, pretty much phishing and
prey on
extortion.
prey
Yeah,
on prey on prey on people,
yeah,
talk to them related around their, call them thinking that you're posing as their healthcare provider, you know their conditions, you
yeah. And so but there's specifically about that breach. That data should have been encrypted, right? That is HIPAA
what,
covered
yeah,
data,
yeah, how,
personal
and
health
then
information.
how are they not doing that?
Right. I mean, when you're holding medical records on 150 million people or more, how are you failing basic HIPAA requirements, right? And how is that not getting audited and and controlled, right? Um, and then I forgot the other thing, so we can move on.
This other one is Midnight Blizzard hitting Microsoft. So this is a Russian. I love these hacking names like Midnight
I know
Blizzard.
hackers come
It's
up with the
like,
best names.
they were in the company executives' email accounts, and this is Foreign Intelligence Agency, uh, the Cozy Bear Group. I don't know tons about foreign intelligence
Yeah,
hacking, but it's still, uh, you know, again, you get the Microsoft email accounts,
yeah,
you get access to execs at that company. Um, you know,
yep. So,
then what do you get into?
and again,
It's
it's
a
just then you yeah, you can have access to a lot of, but this is the same thing that we keep talking about. It was phishing, it was lack of two-factor authentication, and it's social engineering. Oftentimes, usually, the computer
mhm,
is actually not the weakest part in the system. It's always the people. People are so easy to hack, so easy to trick, because fundamentally, I think we're used to trusting. We're used to trusting people, and because most people are good, and most people aren't trying to scam you or lie to you, but it becomes a problem, when that leads to an attack, and that's why we need the technical controls. We need the two-factor authentication. We need the security training to tell people, oh, this is a thing you shouldn't respond to, and then if you do respond to it, we
mhm,
have other technical controls in place to prevent the
mhm,
account takeover. And it's
mhm,
it's it's always the same. So on the bright side, these are, again, advanced persistent threats, right? If you're not Microsoft, the chances of you being targeted by these state actors is pretty slim, but still turn on the two-factor. It's not that hard.
yeah,
Just do it.
yeah. Yeah, and we talked about the last one here, National Public Data. This was the big one. That's the background check company, where we could probably I think we said that
That was our first episode.
everybody's social security number has now been compromised, and we went through that in previous episodes about how to protect that. Um, yeah, I mean, 1.3 million people. I mean, again, it really, you know, makes it. I mean, you just wonder, like, what's coming in future years. Like, with all this data out there, hopefully we're not seeing a bunch of uh, issues for people, but it could happen, right?
Yeah, I really wish that there was a way to rotate your social security number to securely get a new number from the government and just have that reissued. That would solve so many problems. Um, but as it stands, we talked about it before, but there's always your credit locking and just taking care to manage your own, you know, data hygiene. Um, but yeah,
And I guess people may have to hire those companies to scrub their stuff off the internet. You know.
well, that's what I was gonna say. So Change paid $22 million to the ransom, right? And that kind of brings to this point too. There's no guarantee that the that they deleted that. In fact, I'm 100% sure they didn't, right? So the, just like how the FBI won't negotiate with terrorists, if you pay the ransomware, you're just opening yourself up to future future attacks, and because now people know that you pay, and I mean it's not, and they're still probably going to release your data. right? If they have it in the first place. So,
Yeah.
don't pay. And if you get ransomware, well, you should watch our episode on ransomware and make sure you keep good backups, keep offsite backups, you know. So if you're resilient against that and somebody encrypts your hard drive, you can just say, oh, okay, you have that hard drive. I'm going to get rid of it, get a new one, and recover all my data. Easy peasy.
I think your point, though, that uh, you're less vulnerable as an individual person,
Yeah.
but your information within a big organization is vulnerable, and it's. I mean, to your point, these companies likely won't regulate themselves.
Right.
There's a business interest to hold a lot of data, mine the data. We've got companies now taking your data and turning and running AI algorithms on it. It's unless this stuff starts to get regulated like Europe does, we're just going to kind of have this wild west for a while.
Yeah, and I think partly it's up to us to, as consumers of services and technology, to say, I'm not going to use this if they're wholesale harvesting my data, right? And it
Yeah.
can be hard. It's really, really challenging to stop using Google, for example, right? Even though they are, or Facebook, Meta, right, is one of the worst offenders for harvesting that data, and it can be hard. But until we
It,
stand up and say, I'm not going to stand for this, there's no repercussion. Until you say, oh, you lost all my data again, well, then I'm going to close my account.
I mean, it's we're going to come full circle in this episode when we get to our way back item, but we are moving into a completely digital world, and we've been going there slowly since when? Probably 90s. We started to kind of migrate that way, and it's just going to get quadrupled, 10x. It's just going to continue to get more and more digital. Um, and it's challenging because I think even the way that people have to go get a job now, you have to have a computer, you have to be able to get on a job site, fill out an application. The days of like just being able to pop in and fill out a paper form. Like, well, no, you have to go stand at a kiosk at Target and fill out their digital thing. It just makes the world a little bit difficult, and it makes it more expensive for everybody as well. And I think these are some of the things we're going to have to kind of come to terms with at some point, because if everything's connected and you got to have a subscription for everything, it's just gonna, at some point, people are just gonna say, I can't afford this anymore.
Yeah, it's not great. I gotta say that like schools don't have textbooks anymore. All the kids are getting iPads, and they're just like, you know, they're hitting the same couple of websites for all their reference data. Nobody knows how to use a library. Like, I think it's a big problem. I
A library, the best invention ever.
right.
Now they have, we take our little gal to the library. It's so great to go back in the library, but we don't go to a library. We Google.
Mm-hmm.
We use ChatGPT now. There's something nice about something that's analog. Which brings us to our next story. The paper passport is now dying and becoming digital too, which I'm not quite sure. I don't think this is a good idea at all. Passports became standardized after World War II as a security measure. There's security features on the passport itself. It's stamped. It's kind of a fun little thing you have. But now they want to move to e-passports. And I just don't know that this is a good idea.
I will keep my paper passport until they pull it out of my cold, dead hands. Like, there's no way. I'm never gonna get a digital passport. It's too valuable to have a
So,
physical document.
so I mean, I guess if you consider it, maybe it's just a backup. We're at mobile boarding passes now. It's hard to even get a printout of a boarding pass. You take your phone and you go through. But the problem with traveling internationally is you if you're doing it right, you should have a photocopy of your passport somewhere on your person, in addition to your passport, or a photocopy somewhere else, because they can get stolen. The other thing is like if it's in your phone, there are times where, through customs of a country, you could have your device just taken. This happened to a woman in coming back. Some New Yorker was coming back from Iceland with her computer that has everything on there. She was there for vacation, and they said that her laptop was like flagged for some explosive chemicals or whatever, and they kept her laptop, everything on there. And like that's a pretty terrifying like thing to go like, I mean, that could, it definitely disrupted probably her life for months, depending on what's on there. And that's the challenge with these digital devices. And I just think a passport, no, don't go there.
Yeah, and if you think about like what you can do, like a passport is by necessity a canonical proof of identity, right? If you have your passport, it's in a lot of places it's accepted, in the same way that a birth certificate is accepted. It's a proof of citizenship and it's a proof of identity. And if you think that a digital passport is immune to being stolen or compromised, tell that to all the people who have lost their Bitcoin wallets due to phishing, right? Like it's the same, right? And if once somebody steals that digital credential, they are you effectively. It's if they steal your paper passport, it's not great, but at least you can easily get a new one, and it has your picture on it and whatnot. A digital version, and then it's
what are you gonna do? You're in London, you're enjoying your vacation. You're using your map to find your way around, and some guy just rides by on a bike and snatches your phone, and there everything goes. And now you're like trying to figure out how you're going to get home, and trying to figure out how to have an identity. And
maybe I'm just old, but I'm against it.
So speaking of old, Pierre, let's talk about the rotary phone. Did you guys ever have a rotary dial phone?
Yes. In fact, my parents still have one. And what's cool about it is do you remember those old Ericsson phones that had the rotary on the bottom? And then it was like a single arm thing. That actually, it's a museum piece. And my parents still have one, and they still use it. They have a landline and everything. My mom still has a fax machine. Like they're definitely old school. It's pretty cool.
So for those who don't know, a rotary phone is basically a dial with numbers 1 through 0, and then they also had the alphabet on there too. And the idea was that there was originally you could do named exchange dialing, but then they thought they left it on there because they felt it would help people memorize numbers. But yeah, I remember like we had one, and you go 2, 2, 3, and then you go down to 8, 8, 5, 5, and it all would all turn and sound a little bit different based on how far you were from the like little lever stop on the phone.
And then I don't know if you remember the evolution of that. There was a switch on the phone where you could switch it between touch tone and the pulse. If your phone network didn't support touch tone, you could have your electronic phone mimic the pulses that those old rotary phones had. It's cool stuff.
And you actually had to memorize your phone number, which I think I probably have 2 phone numbers memorized now, but I used to have everybody's phone numbers memorized.
I still remember my best friend's phone number from when we were 10, but I couldn't tell you his phone number now. I remember the number for the BBS we used to call up to. That'll be our next way back, the BBS. You
had your little paper phone book by the phone. You'd page through it, and it had the ABC tabs, and you turn to the tab, and you'd
I was
put the
just explaining to my kids what a phone book was, and that we had two of them, one for businesses and one for people. And yeah, it's pretty crazy. There's actually, admittedly, probably very small, but there's been a little bit of a resurgence of landlines. I was seeing on social media this author, I don't know if you've heard of him, but John Scalzi. He was saying he has a landline, um, because he gives it out to all the companies when they do loyalty or whatever, because you can't get text spam to a landline. And he's like, I'm so sick of all the text spam. Just text my landline all you want. Which, yeah, good idea.
Did you ever have or know anybody who had a party line?
Well, that was a flaw in the protocol from the phone company, right? Where you were able to tap the line and use it illicitly. I didn't. I think that flaw was fixed in the 70s or
Yeah,
early 80s. Yeah.
what I knew of it was anybody who had a second phone line, it was typically a party line, and there could be times where you'd be talking on there and there'd be other people in the neighborhood,
Yeah, you could tap into
on
the
the phone as
lines.
well.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Hmm.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
We and then, and then I remember like in college there was like the phone in the hallway, and it was a shared phone, and you'd go get in line to dial 9 and get out of the organization.
Yeah, a lot of
So
the early sort of hackers started with hacking the phone systems, um, and it's kind of like there's phone phreaking, and there's all this. Yeah, the party line was another exploit. So there's some cool history around sort of exploiting systems, and a lot of that same knowledge and those techniques morphed into computer hacking, and when as computers became more ubiquitous. Cool stuff.
and now we all carry our own phone numbers with us for logging in everything.
Yep.
And that two-factor authentication.
Yep. Although I prefer my hardware two-factor over any of the other ones, but yeah.
Well, hopefully somebody learned what a rotary phone was, and maybe we'll do some other analog.
Careful, we're gonna get called boomers again.
Yep. I think it's funny when like there's a couple like YouTubers I watch where they'll tell their kids about things, and the kids going, what is this?
Yeah.
And what's also funny is like the phone. This was the signal for phone. People don't do that at all anymore. It's just part of how you do this little thing.
You don't have a handset anymore,
right? It's part of the evolution of technology, I guess.
Although I don't know, I feel like we've lost some stuff there. Maybe you can still replicate it now. Like I know my daughter's been asking, she wants her phone, she wants to be able to text her friends and stuff. But like there was just this excitement when you were a kid, like getting your first bank account or getting your own, like it was like a rite of passage when you got your phone number, and it's like, yeah, now you can call me, and we just don't really do that anymore.
I don't know. What are like some of the modern equivalents of getting your own line?
Right?
Getting your Instagram handle, getting your website domain. There's something they're not quite as cool as having a phone number.
Right? Like, and it would just ring in your phone, and you'd just in your room, right? And nobody else could answer that because it only came into your room. But I don't know, that was cool. I don't know. Probably still getting your own car is still a cool thing.
No, a bicycle.
I mean,
that's the first sign of freedom was a bicycle, or you had a skateboard. You could skateboard around too. Yeah. Well, anyway, we got to run. So thanks for joining us today. If you want to check out any of the stories or topics we covered, or learn about the rotary phone, head over to maydaily.com/blog. And if you have a story you'd like to share, or a site you'd like reviewed, or a topic you want our 2 cents on, please leave us a comment.
Don't forget to subscribe.
Until next time,
stay secure.
Made daily.